Hi, this is Georgia State Rep Karen Lupton talking to you about Budget Week this week in the Georgia General Assembly. We have not been working inside our chambers. We haven't been meeting in our small committees discussing legislation. This week has been all about listening to proposals and budget asks from every department in the state. They come down to the Capitol. Their heads tell us what they think they need, how they have spent the money that we've already given them, what their budget was last year, what they think they might need this year. So it's very numbers heavy. It can get a little intense, but I was specifically focused on, my ears were particularly listening for things in our education department and some things around sexual assault survivors, as well as I wondered how we got such a big hole in our foster care budget, in our DFACS budget in the Department of Human Services for the state of Georgia. And I got some answers to those questions. As far as public education, we're at a good high school graduate rate. Like our percentage of kids graduating high school is very high. The superintendent Woods, the state superintendent of schools, believes that this is because one of the reasons is that because we're losing some of the emphasis on kids going to four-year colleges to be successful. There's more trade school applications and things like that, especially through Georgia Match, that are showing kids that, hey, if you graduate high school, here's other places you can go. You don't only have to go to college. Get your degree, and then you can go and do these other things as well. That's one of the reasons that he thinks that we're at such a good graduation rate. The superintendent supports putting a reading literacy coach in every elementary school in the state. I do not have, and I didn't see that he had the exact line item cost for that. We have some reading coaches because Georgia's reading scores are abysmal when it comes to elementary school. He's backing Speaker Burns's policy to increase the amount of reading coaches in schools. There are coaches in schools right now, literacy coaches in schools right now, some of the lowest performing ones, but those are all being paid for with federal funds. So he wants state funds to get a reading coach in every elementary school in the state. One thing that is not necessarily budget related, but it is policy related and might become a budget issue, is that we are sure to hear in education at the state level a request to ban cell phones through 12th grade, K through 12th, a ban on cell phones in K through 8 takes effect this year. A lot of systems already have some sort of, they're working their way towards banning cell phones in the classroom. And there are different ways to do this. In K through 8, what we were focused on in our committee hearings was bell to bell, meaning that a child does not have access to their phone in K through 8 from the bell that starts the day to the bell that ends the day. Now, I don't think that will be something that will be proposed for 9 through 12 as far as banning cell phones, but there will be a vigorous discussion about this in the General Assembly this year. Look for it. Is it a budget issue? Maybe. If we have a mandate that will cost schools money, I think we should give them some funds to complete that task if we're mandating that they do it. Sometimes this is met with resistance. So we will have to see what happens in regards to the cell phone bans, which may or may not be a budget issue. One thing that has another set of numbers that really caught everyone's attention was the decrease in the amount of kids enrolled in public schools. It has fallen by 34,000 kids, over 34,000 kids in 1 year. Now, the last time we saw that big of a drop was in COVID. We lost 36,000 kids from the school system for COVID. So this is a drop almost as big as COVID. The superintendent gave several reasons for this. One, birth rates are declining. In the state overall, there are fewer kids going into kindergarten than there are 12th graders graduating. So we're feeding fewer children into the pipeline due to lower birth rates. People just aren't having kids or having as many. There's also, he postulated that empty nesters, people who no longer who live in good districts but don't have kids anymore, might be resisting moving and allowing a family with kids to buy that house because the market is so bad. They also postulated that private school and private school enrollment is probably getting a good chunk of kids out of public schools. And they stated that this is happening like evenly around the state, that this disenrollment is not happening in certain pockets, that it seems pretty evenly spread around the state. We, of course, now have this Promise Scholarship that gives people $6,500 to take their kids out of a public school and put that money towards tutoring, homeschooling, I should say, or private schools. Now, while we're talking about private schools and the Promise Scholarship, I want to clear up an assumption that some people might have. I was speaking to an acquaintance who said something. She just basically assumed that Promise Scholarship money and state money was not being given to private religious schools. She said, oh, they're exempt, aren't they? And I said, no. In fact, the majority of the money that comes from the state to private schools is for religious private schools. Now, they are 99% Christian schools. There are a few Jewish schools and at least one Islamic religious school that get these monies. But religious schools don't pay taxes. So it bothers me. I mean, schools don't pay taxes, but one would assume that we would not spend state money to get specific religious training for students. That's what we're spending a lot of our money on when it comes to these scholarship programs. So, cursive writing is back. I'm real happy about that. When it comes to budgeting around our state's sexual assault centers and child advocacy centers, we're in a real bad spot. Money from the federal government coming down to us to pay for some of these services, meaning forensic services, interviews for children and adults who are victims of sexual crimes, paying for counselors, paying for legal and courtroom advocates. Paying for these programs these programs are paid for in different centers by a different hodgepodge of money. Some of it is federal, some of it is local, some of it is privately fundraised, some of it is from the state. But the federal amount that the state has been getting to hand out has been dropping like a stone since at least 2018. In 2018, CJCC, the Criminal Justice Coordinated Council, you don't have to know that, there won't be a test afterwards, was giving out upwards of $79 million a year from the federal government. They were passing it through CJCC to get to sexual assault centers and child advocacy centers. $79 million in 2018. Last year, it was $35 million from the feds. So we've gone from $79 million, almost $80 million, to $35 million from the feds. That's a massive, massive shortfall. So what has been happening is that CJCC has fewer and fewer funds to give to these places to help support victims. The executive director said that a couple years ago, they would generally give about $113 to $115 million per partner. They call these centers partners. In past years, last year it was 89 million, down to 89 million, and this year it's going to go down to probably 82 million. Now, the executive director of this program was very clear. He said, we have exhausted every avenue for extra funds. ARPA funds, tying over from COVID, will be gone by September. And the falling amount of money that we're getting from the federal government is really putting a lot of places in bad situations. There are centers that are already cutting positions, already cutting counselors, already cutting advocates, and are frankly just preparing to cut more people, which means that fewer people will be served, which means that fewer crimes get reported, which means that more dangerous criminals just get to run around. There's about a $30 million shortfall in their budget this year. Now, some places are like I said, some centers are out there doing private fundraising. He said one center upped its fundraising last year. They usually only do one fundraiser a year. They did 3 last year, and they still have a $200,000 hole in their budget. There was also, they're in a bad spot, which makes me anxious, and I'm not sure how to fight for more money for them. I certainly will, but when there's no money to give, it's hard to get blood from a stone. Now, my last kind of thing that I was really looking to hear in these budget sessions was about DHS, Department of Human Services, and their $87 million deficit that they sort of suddenly developed. That is a surprise to folks like me, because everything in the budget is all zeroed out. Everything's even when I see budgets. What happened here is that, especially in the foster care system, DFACS takes care of these kids in their cases. DFACS does not have any control over what a judge orders DFACS to do. And DFACS must do what the judge orders, whether it costs them extra money, whether it costs them money they don't have, whether they like it or not, or be found in contempt. So the director of DFACS was saying that, and this is not to throw shade on judges. You're all, everybody's doing what they think is best. But let's say a judge says, this child that's in front of me here for state care needs to be seen at this specific center. And that specific center, that's in their ruling. And that specific center is far away from all their doctor's appointments, all of their, family visitations, everything else. That means that the costs for DFACS to transport that kid increase that much more. The one DFACS caseworker was told, you will go tonight and buy this child clothes with your own money from a judge. And so DFACS has to, when the judge makes the ruling, DFACS has to do it. So they don't have a control over their costs sometimes. They have to do what they're told to do. And if they're told to do something expensive, they have to cough up the money. Now, there's a huge hole blown in their budget also from just a simple rule change at the federal level. A change in a federal rule that is aiming to get kids that are in trouble out of group homes and into foster home settings. That was the goal of this rule change. Basically said you can't provide monies to keep a kid in group care past this amount of time. They shortened that amount of time that the feds will pay for that. That blew a $15 million hole in the DFACS budget immediately, just that one rule change. So I feel that there was a lot of what DFACS does, their reason for being is to take care of kids. So if taking care of kids means writing a check for this much instead of this much, they're going to get the kid taken care of, because that's their goal, and they have to do what, especially what judges tell them. So there's a lot of disconnect around how DFACS can care for a kid and what they're ordered to do and money to make those ends meet. Very fascinating when you learn about these things at the state level. So that's some of the things that I learned during budget week. This is like a 15-minute video. Congratulations if you've made it to the end. I'd play you a little something, but I don't have anything prepared. So budget week over and out. Next week, because of the inclement weather coming this weekend, please stay safe. We will not be gathering in on Monday as we usually do. We're going to burn a day, which means that the speaker will go into the Capitol, the majority leader will go into the Capitol. They will bang the gavel. They will say, we're now in session. The majority leader will say, I move that we adjourn until Tuesday at 10 a.m. He says, great, boom. And that's it. So we're burning a day. We're not doing any work, but it still counts as a legislative day. So the next legislative day that we'll be at will technically be Legislative Day 7. So I'll see you next week at Legislative Day 7.